Black woman fired after helping injured billionaire. Next morning, a gold Rolls-Royce waits outside. Have you ever done the right thing and still got punished for it? Let me ask you this. What would you do if you saw a stranger lying in a pool of blood outside a billion-dollar building and no one else stopped to help? Would you walk by, or would you drop everything? Even if it meant risking your job, your reputation, maybe even your peace? Before we go any further, tell me where you're watching from. I always love knowing where our people are tuning in from. And while you're at it, if you love stories that pull at your soul, hit that subscribe button. It really helps me keep telling the kinds of stories that matter. And hey, just so I know what you want more of, type 1 in the comments if you love this kind of emotional real-life story. Type 0 if it's not really your thing. Be honest. I'm here to create what you want. Now, let me take you back to where this all began. When I arrived at the upscale penthouse downtown, I thought it would be just another long shift. One of those quiet, drawn-out days where I'd brew my tea in the little marble kitchen, straighten up my client's medication tray, and maybe trade a few stories with Robert, the doorman who always called me Sunshine. See, my name is Monica. I'm a caregiver. Late 30s, nothing fancy. I take care of people. That's what I do. That's who I am. And on that particular morning, I was just trying to make it through my last week working for an elderly client who lived in one of the most high-rise, silver glass buildings you've ever seen in your life. It was cold that day. The kind of cold that seeps into your bones no matter how many layers you wear. I remember stepping out of the subway station, gripping my coffee cup like it was gold. The streets were half empty, sky gray, a little mist in the air. And then, I saw him. A man, face down, not moving, right near the front steps of the building. His suit was torn, shirt stained red. Blood. I dropped my bag. Didn't even think. Just ran. Fell to my knees beside him and whispered, Hey, can you hear me?" Nothing. I dialed 911, hands shaking, heart pounding like it was about to explode. All I could think was, please don't die. Not like this. Sirens started wailing in the distance, and while I waited, I held his head in my lap and whispered, "Hold on. Help is coming." I didn't know who he was. I didn't care. I just knew. He needed someone. What I didn't know was that helping him would flip my entire life upside down, and that by the very next morning, a gold Rolls-Royce would be waiting outside my door. If you're ready to find out what happened next, stay right here. Because this story, it's not what you think. The next morning, I showed up to work like I always did. Hair tied back, thermos in hand, heart still heavy from the night before. But something was off. My badge didn't scan. The front desk staff avoided eye contact. And when the building manager finally pulled me aside, he just said, "We're letting you go. No details, just pack your things." No thank you. No explanation. Just gone. I asked why. I asked if it had something to do with what happened outside the building. He shrugged. This came from higher up. So I walked out of that high-rise with my little box of things, holding back tears. I didn't cry because I lost a job. I cried because for the first time in a long time, I thought maybe I mattered. And then I was reminded, I don't. And you know what? The story of what I did for that man was on the morning news. Footage from the building's security camera blurred out. They talked about a mysterious billionaire found bleeding outside his own building. But they never said my name. Never mentioned the woman who held his hand while the siren screamed closer. I was invisible again. I went home, changed into my old hoodie, and sat on the edge of my bed in that tiny studio apartment, the one with the flickering light in the hallway and a window view of nothing but brick. I didn't expect anything after that, didn't even tell anyone what I did, just made a pot of tea and tried to forget. But the universe had other plans, because the very next morning, there it was, a gold Rolls-Royce, parked right outside my building like it didn't even realize how out of place it looked on my street, where people parked with 2 tires on the curb just to avoid getting booted, and inside, taped to the window, a small white envelope, just 5 words. "You helped me. Let me return the favor. E." I almost didn't respond. I didn't want a reward. I didn't save him for that. But something inside me whispered, "Go." So I did. I got in the car, quiet, cautious, I had his watch. He'd dropped it in the chaos, and I figured, if nothing else, I'd give it back. When I arrived at the new location, some private residence hidden behind gates and ivy, I was met with warmth. A kind housekeeper led me in. No tension, no security guards, just stillness. Then I saw him. Elliot Knox. Yes, that Elliot Knox, the billionaire tech investor who vanished from public life after that nasty divorce scandal a year ago. The one who built an empire and then disappeared when his wife accused him of things that split public opinion right down the middle. But there he was. No boardroom suit, just soft sweats, healing wounds, a man with tired eyes, and a voice softer than I expected. "Monica," he said, "you saved my life." I shrugged, tried to make a joke. "Don't flatter me, I just called 911. He smiled. "No, you stayed. That's different." We sat in the sunroom. He made us tea, said it helped him sleep. We talked. About nothing, really. About the quiet. About how strange it feels when your world stops, but everyone else keeps moving. I told him about growing up in Georgia, about how I used to sneak into my grandma's living room just to hear old jazz records on the floor model stereo. He told me about coding in his dorm room, about nights when success didn't mean anything because he had no one to share it with, and for some reason, it felt natural. Over the next few days, he called. Nothing romantic, just late-night conversations about books we loved and songs we hadn't heard in years. We talked about disappearing, what it felt like to go unseen for so long, even when the world is looking straight at you. He told me I had the kind of voice that made silence feel like safety. I told him he laughed like someone who didn't think they were allowed to anymore. There was no flirting, no expectations, just this strange, quiet connection, like two people sitting at opposite ends of a long table, sliding handwritten notes across to each other. And somewhere in all that stillness, I started to feel seen again, not because he was rich, not because of the car or the house or the mystery of his name, but because for the first time in years, someone looked at me and listened. And maybe that's where it really begins, not with a kiss, not with a touch, but with being heard. And that's where things started to shift. But I didn't see it then. I didn't see what was coming. It started off innocent. Simple conversations, shared silence. But then, little things. Things I told myself not to notice. Like how Elliot always leaned in just a bit too close when he spoke. Not in a way that screamed intentions, but enough that I could feel the warmth of his breath when he laughed. Enough that I noticed when he smelled like pine and something expensive I couldn't name. Or how, when he said my name, his voice changed. Softer, slower, like he was savoring it. Monica. That's all. But it made something stir in my chest that I wasn't ready to name. I remember one afternoon, we were sitting out on the garden terrace, the sky turning that soft orange pink that always makes the air feel thicker. I was talking about the patients I used to care for, how sometimes people just want someone to sit with them, not fix them. He looked at me for a long time, eyes calm, but studying me. Then he said it. "You're calm. The world's not, but you are. It's like being near you slows everything down." I smiled, politely, but inside, I froze. Because that wasn't the kind of compliment you give a stranger. That was something else. Still, I told myself, it's just gratitude. Just his way of saying thank you, nothing more. But I started noticing more. The way he always seemed to stand a little closer than he needed to. How he'd wait for me to sit before he did. How he never looked at his phone when we were talking, like every word I said deserved all of him. And when he talked about his ex-wife, once, maybe twice, I caught something flicker in his eyes. Not just bitterness. It was layered. Regret? Maybe. Longing? Possibly. Resentment? Definitely. He said, "We built something big, but it cost too much." Then he stared off like he was still inside that sentence, trapped somewhere between memory and mistake. I nodded, pretending not to feel what I felt, pretending not to feel how my heart reacted to his vulnerability. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment like a movie I didn't ask to star in. Why am I even thinking about this? He's not mine. He's just grateful. That's it. That's all this is. But deep down, I knew I was lying to myself, because it felt like something. And I wasn't sure if I wanted it to stop, or if I was afraid of what would happen if it didn't. It was just supposed to be a quick stop. I found his cufflinks wedged in the lining of my coat pocket, one of those small, expensive things that slipped through unnoticed during the chaos. I told myself I'd drop them off and leave. No tea, no small talk, just in and out. But then the sky opened up. I was halfway up the stone steps when thunder cracked so loud it felt like the ground exhaled. By the time I knocked, I was soaked through my jacket, raindrops trailing down my collar, making my skin shiver. He opened the door barefoot, his shirt slightly wrinkled. Not the usual put-together version of himself. His hair was tousled, and his eyes looked tired, but warm. "Come in," he said, stepping aside. "I just came to drop these off," I replied, holding the small box out with both hands. He smiled. "You're not going back out in that. Not tonight." I hesitated, just for a second. The storm made the decision for me. Inside, the mood was different. The estate always felt pristine, almost staged, like no one actually lived there. But that night, something was different. The power flickered, twice. Then, a low hum of silence. No lights, just shadows and the soft glow of candles that the housekeeper must have already lit around the room. They danced against the walls like the past refusing to stay still. We sat in the main room, opposite ends of a velvet couch that felt too wide, too rich for a night like that. The rain hit the windows like fingertips tapping to be let in. The thunder softened into background noise, like a heartbeat muffled under blankets. He handed me a cup of hot tea. I wrapped both hands around it, grateful for the warmth. Then he said something I wasn't expecting. When I was in the hospital, unconscious, I kept hearing a voice. I don't know if it was real or not, but I remember it. He turned toward me slightly. It was you, your voice, saying, "Hold on, help is coming." It was the only thing that kept me calm. I swallowed, hard. I hadn't even realized I was holding my breath until that moment. We sat like that for a while, not speaking, letting the storm say everything we didn't want to. At some point, I reached to refill his tea. And when I handed it back to him, our fingers brushed. Not by accident. Not dramatically either, just gently. But he didn't move his hand away. And I didn't either. Not right away. I should have. I knew I should have. But something about the moment made me pause. Not because it was romantic, but because it felt safe. Still. Like the world had shrunk down to just that couch, just that room, just the soft flicker of candlelight and the smell of steeping leaves and the warmth of skin against skin. He looked at me, not with hunger, not with need, but with something that felt closer to recognition. Like he saw a piece of himself in me, and it startled us both. I looked away first, cleared my throat, pulled the blanket a little tighter around my shoulders. He didn't push, didn't speak, just sipped his tea slowly, the way a person does when they're trying not to say the wrong thing. But the air between us had shifted. Something had passed through the room and settled on both of us like mist. And even though neither of us said anything out loud, we both felt it, and neither of us could unfeel it. After that night, something in me changed. Or maybe it didn't change. Maybe it just woke up. I went home and everything felt louder. The kettle's whistle, the buzz of my phone, the silence between text notifications. I stared at his name on my screen longer than I should have. And then, I started pulling away, little by little. I told myself it was the right thing to do. At first, it was subtle. Delayed responses, shorter replies. I blamed it on work. Said I was tired. Said I was visiting my sister, though I wasn't. I just needed space. To think. To breathe. To remind myself who I was before him. Because every time I saw his name, every time I remembered the warmth of his hand brushing mine in the candlelight, I felt something rise in my chest that didn't belong there. Desire? Maybe. But deeper than that, it was yearning. To be seen, to be held emotionally, not physically. To be valued. without conditions. But the guilt came just as fast. I thought about the families I'd worked with, the wives who trusted me to care for their husbands, their fathers, the invisible line I never crossed. And now, here I was, teetering, wanting something I didn't even ask for, feeling drawn to a man who technically wasn't taken, but emotionally, he was still entangled, still unraveling his past, while somehow getting tangled in me. One afternoon, I got a text from him. Did I do something wrong? Simple, soft, not accusing, just honest. I stared at it. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. No, I wanted to write. You didn't do anything wrong. I'm the one trying not to feel this. But instead, I typed, "It's just been a long week," and hit send. That night, he messaged again. This time, a voice note. His tone was low, gentle, a little tired. "I miss your calm." 7 seconds. That was all. 7 seconds that sat in my phone like a secret I didn't know how to carry. I listened to it once, then again, and then I deleted it. Not because it wasn't beautiful, but because it was. Because it made me ache in a way I wasn't proud of. Because it made something inside me whisper, "He sees you, Monica. He hears you. He actually misses you." And that was dangerous. So I stopped replying. I filled my time with errands I didn't need to run, chores I'd already done. I busied myself with everything and nothing. But no matter how far I tried to run, emotionally, mentally, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had stepped into something real. And now I was standing right at the edge, not sure if I was strong enough to walk away, or if I was already too far in. It was supposed to be a quick stop, just 20 minutes. Return a book he lent me, an old first edition Baldwin, soft with time. Say a polite thank you, leave. But the sky had other plans. The moment I stepped inside, thunder cracked through the windows like the sky itself was breaking open. Rain beat against the glass like it needed to be let in. And suddenly, 20 minutes felt like eternity. He met me at the door, barefoot, casual, but his eyes held something I hadn't seen before. Not curiosity, not gratitude, something searching. He led me to the den, where the fireplace was already lit. He'd been expecting me, or maybe hoping. We sat across from each other, 2 mugs between us. Chamomile for me, black coffee for him. The silence wasn't awkward. It was full, heavy, like both of us were carrying something we didn't know how to say. Then he spoke, quietly, not like a declaration, but like a truth that had been sitting too long inside his chest. "You didn't just save my life that day." I looked up, confused. He held my gaze. "You reminded me I'm still human. I think about you more than I should." I didn't answer at first, not because I didn't have words, but because I had too many. My throat tightened. My chest pulled in that deep, aching way it does when you've held something back for too long. And then I whispered, "I've thought about you too, and hated myself for it." The moment hung between us like fog. He didn't reach for me. I didn't lean in. Our hands were resting on the couch cushion between us. At some point, our fingers brushed again, just barely. But neither of us moved away. It was the kind of touch that said too much without saying anything at all. I remember the sound of the rain tapping on the window behind him, the way the fire crackled, almost like it knew it was watching something fragile. I couldn't look at him for long, because every time I did, I saw myself mirrored back. Not the woman who followed rules, not the professional caregiver with boundaries and lines, but the other me, the lonely one, the one who craved connection without shame, the one who wanted to be chosen, not just needed. He leaned back, running a hand through his hair as if frustrated by his own honesty. "I didn't want to tell you that," he said. "I've tried not to feel it." I nodded. "I know," I whispered. "Me too." There was no kiss, no reaching, no scandalous moment, just 2 people, torn open quietly. And that made it worse, because it wasn't about bodies. It was about being seen, finally, deeply, by someone who saw too much And that's the most dangerous kind of intimacy. The kind that reaches under your skin and wraps around your soul. Not lust, not thrill, but understanding. And in that moment, I didn't know if I was supposed to feel grateful or terrified. I knew it had to end the night I stopped being able to breathe in his presence. Not because he overwhelmed me, but because being near him started to feel like a betrayal, not of anyone else, but of myself. So I waited until the sky was quiet again. No thunder, no storm, just silence. A kind of stillness that only comes when something has finally settled. I brewed one last pot of tea, brought it over like I always did. He smiled when he saw me, like nothing had changed. But everything had. I carried that folded letter in my coat pocket the entire time. My hands shook when I placed it on his grand piano, the one he never played in front of me, but I always knew he loved. I didn't say goodbye. I just nodded once, like I was bowing out of something holy. Like a final curtain call after a show you never meant to star in. When I reached the front steps, the rain had started again, not pouring. Just a soft, steady mist, like the sky was grieving with me, but gently. I walked away without looking back. And as I stepped into the quiet of the street, I could hear the echo of my own voice repeating the words I had left behind in that letter. You don't owe me anything. You never did. I needed to know I could feel again. Now I need to remember who I was. Before you. He offered me money before I left. A quiet offer. Subtle. Polite. Like he thought maybe that would soften the leaving. I didn't even look at the check. I just said, "No, Elliot. That's not the kind of debt we owe each other." And I asked him, kindly, firmly, not to contact me again. It wasn't anger. It wasn't punishment. It was survival. The next morning, the gold Rolls-Royce came back. Same driver. Same quiet hum of power in the engine. It waited outside my building for over an hour. I saw it from my window. But I didn't move. Not out of pride. Not out of fear. But because I knew if I stepped into that car again, I wouldn't come back the same woman. And some parts of me, I wasn't willing to lose. So I sat on the floor of my tiny living room, sipping tea that had long gone cold, and let myself feel everything I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years. Longing, grief, freedom, and strangely, peace. I knew it had to end the night I stopped being able to breathe in his presence, not because he overwhelmed me, but because being near him started to feel like a betrayal, not of anyone else but of myself. So I waited until the sky was quiet again. No thunder, no storm, just silence. A kind of stillness that only comes when something has finally settled. I brewed one last pot of tea, brought it over like I always did. He smiled when he saw me, like nothing had changed, but everything had. I carried that folded letter in my coat pocket the entire time. My hands shook when I placed it on his grand piano, the one he never played in front of me, but I always knew he loved. I didn't say goodbye. I just nodded once, like I was bowing out of something holy. Like a final curtain call after a show you never meant to star in. When I reached the front steps, the rain had started again, not pouring. Just a soft, steady mist, like the sky was grieving with me, but gently. I walked away without looking back. And as I stepped into the quiet of the street, I could hear the echo of my own voice repeating the words I had left behind in that letter. You don't owe me anything. You never did. I needed to know I could feel again. Now I need to remember who I was. Before you. He offered me money before I left. A quiet offer. Subtle. Polite. Like he thought maybe that would soften the leaving. I didn't even look at the check. I just said, "No, Elliot. That's not the kind of debt we owe each other." And I asked him, kindly, firmly, not to contact me again. It wasn't anger. It wasn't punishment. It was survival. The next morning, the gold Rolls-Royce came back. Same driver. Same quiet hum of power in the engine. It waited outside my building for over an hour. I saw it from my window, but I didn't move. Not out of pride, not out of fear, but because I knew if I stepped into that car again, I wouldn't come back the same woman. And some parts of me, I wasn't willing to lose. So I sat on the floor of my tiny living room, sipping tea that had long gone cold, and let myself feel everything I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years. Longing, grief, freedom, and strangely, peace. 3 days passed. No calls, no texts, no car humming outside. It felt like grief, but not the sharp kind that makes you cry into a pillow. This was quieter, like someone had turned the volume down on my whole life. Then, one morning, just after dawn, I heard the soft vibration of my phone on the nightstand. A voicemail. From a number I'd erased, but not forgotten. I sat there for a while before pressing play, just holding the phone in my palm like it was a fragile thing. Then his voice filled the room. "You were the first real thing in my life in years." He didn't sound broken. He didn't sound like he was trying to convince me of anything. He just sounded human. You weren't wrong to feel what you did. Neither was I. There was a pause after that, long enough for me to feel like maybe he'd hung up. But then, "Be well, Monica, and thank you for everything." That was it. No plea, no final gesture, no promise to wait. Just closure. And somehow that made it even harder. Because the truth is, sometimes the most painful goodbyes are the ones that are respectful. The ones where no one begs, no one chases, no one makes it harder than it already is. I didn't call back. I didn't cry either. I just laid there, with his words echoing through my apartment, and let the silence take up space where he used to be. Some people come into your life like a soft breath you didn't know you were holding. They don't crash in. They don't take up space. They just awaken something you thought had gone quiet forever. Elliot didn't change my world. He reminded me that it still existed, that I could feel something again. After years of playing it safe, of showing up, clocking in, going home, and convincing myself that peace meant silence. But now I wonder, was I wrong for feeling something I never asked for? Or was I just human? No lines were crossed, no vows were broken, but something inside me shifted, something I can't quite name. And maybe that's the part that hurts the most. When nothing technically happens, but everything still feels changed. People always assume infidelity is about bodies, about secrets behind closed doors, but sometimes it's about emotion, about connection, about being seen so clearly, so gently, that you start to forget you ever felt invisible. And maybe saving him that morning. Maybe that wasn't just fate. Maybe it was the universe's strange way of saving me too, saving the part of me that still wanted, not love, but truth. So no, I didn't stay, but I didn't regret any of it either. Because now, I know. I'm still capable of feeling deeply, of choosing wisely, of walking away even when every part of me wanted to stay. If you've ever been caught between what's right and what's real, tell me in the comments. What would you have done? Would you have stayed a little longer? Would you have walked away sooner? Type 1 in the comments if this kind of story speaks to you. Type 0 if it didn't connect, so I know what to create next time. And before you go, don't forget to subscribe to Mr. Alex Stories, where we explore the soft, complicated, messy places that live inside all of us. Until next time, take care of your heart. It remembers more than you think.